Welcome to the second ever episode of Value Stack. My name is Bo, otherwise known as Shaper Funds on Twitter. I'm accompanied by my esteemed co-host, Zach, BTC BAP. And today we're going to do things a little bit differently. We are doing a crash course on what Bitcoin is for the newbie listeners, also anyone who is excited as we are and likes to listen to anything about Bitcoin. So
bullish. Dude, I've got my coffee. We're ready to go. I'm about to give a Bitcoin masterclass. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, 20-minute Bitcoin masterclass. Unfortunately, I scheduled something this afternoon, so constraints lead to creativity.
World, just so you know, world, this guy skis and plays golf in the same business day. Well, it's not even a business day. He gets more done on your off days than most people do in business days.
I skied Copper Mountain, Colorado this morning, and I'll be golfing 18 holes this afternoon. So,
dude, you're doing a full 18, huh?
Yeah.
Wow.
So there's no time to waste. Bitcoin, what is it? Why don't you start from the very beginning, Zach? Tell us a little bit about what Bitcoin is, where it started, who started it, and take it.
All right. What is Bitcoin? It is essentially numbers and numbers. It's a 0 and a 1, like all things on computers are, which is why it's crazy to ban it. But more or less abstract speaking, it is a program that has a native currency into it, a native sort of tracking that native thing that tracks value inside of its own ecosystem, called a Bitcoin. So there's Bitcoin, the network, which is like the capital B, and then there's the lowercase Bitcoin, which is the Bitcoin, the asset, which is native to the Bitcoin, the network. Bitcoin's, like many other cryptocurrencies, although Bitcoin was first, has its own native blockchain, because that's essentially what it is a blockchain. And but it's also many other parts. The blockchain is only one part of Bitcoin. Blockchain is where all the records are stored, but the miners, the nodes, the supply distribution, the difficulty adjustment, these are all parts of Bitcoin, but aren't necessarily all blockchain. So, but Bitcoin's common in that. And the unique thing about it is that unlike most cryptocurrencies that have their own blockchains and their own, exist within them, Bitcoin's supply is finite, and it requires physical energy in order to actually get them. And if you try to cheat it, you won't win, and you'll lose all the physical energy that you exerted trying to cheat the system. So, over a better part of a decade, people started to figure that out. And here we are today where it's like worth $60,000 per Bitcoin. Well, it was. So Bitcoin is a lot of things. It's a discipline, multidisciplinary pinnacle of many different inventions put together. But what is Bitcoin to you?
So Bitcoin to me is its own monetary system, which I think we both started to talk about things that are a bit complex and out there. But I think starting at the basics, like the blockchain, like I didn't know that Satoshi Nakamoto invented the blockchain until recently, and I'm so embarrassed by that. For some reason, I thought blockchain technology had been here, and then he figured out a way to make it into an online digital currency.
Other way around, actually. So, there was like Digi B money and Digi Cash and like other. I was so young when these came out. E-Gold and B money, I think, were some. And what happened is like they all were not able to be centrally verified that people were either issuing them centrally, or, which doesn't solve the problem because we're right back to Federal Reserve in that case, or we are double spending. And so the blockchain occurred, which was the invention that combined with the difficulty mechanism and those are what made Bitcoin kind of this like breakthrough. But it wasn't the first cryptocurrency. So I'm glad you mentioned that, because a lot of
Yeah.
people don't realize that like cryptocurrencies actually came before Bitcoin, and not the common form that you know today. And maybe cryptocurrency is not the right, uh,
Let's
not
say
the
let's
right,
say
not the right
digital
word.
money exists.
Digital money, right? Internet
Digital
money.
money, internet money existed before, but with
Yeah,
the blockchain.
And PayPal was trying to make, that was what PayPal was founded to do. And I sent you some texts earlier about Peter Thiel. It's no surprise that he's a Bitcoiner now, because PayPal was founded to create an internet money, and they realized that they didn't have the right way to do it. So they abandoned that part of the business and sent money via email instead. But having this like decentralized version of cash has been a human invention that's been in desire, people have been trying to do for a long time.
So with digital cash, it's a lot like a file on your computer. Like you need some central entity to say that this file is good, this file isn't. But the thing about typical computer files is that you can copy them. You
Right.
create new files. So I send you a picture, you send your friend a picture, and now everyone has a picture. But what the blockchain is it's a one ledger where everything that has happened before is recorded, and everything that continues to occur on the blockchain iterates on what has already occurred before, and everyone who hosts the network
Post that copy.
continues.
Yep.
Post the copy. So there is only one form of each transaction, or there's all kinds of things that exist on the blockchain now, but there is only one time that this thing happened, and every company or every computer verifies that happened. So that, I guess, is a blockchain in the simplest way I can explain it.
Yeah, I mean the real breakthrough is triple entry accounting. So in a single entry accounting, I give you, I give you the money and you give me a receipt. Or sorry, that's in single entry accounting is like I give you money, let's say you're a bank, and you say, "Cool, thanks. We'll put it on our records that you owe us some money." Double entry accounting expands upon that and says, "Okay, not only am I going to put it on my books, I'm the bank. Not only am I going to put it on my books that you have your money here, but I'm actually going to give you a receipt that you can also prove to everybody that you have your money here." And then triple entry accounting came along just recently, this last decade, or in 2008. And that was, okay, I've got your money. You know that. You've got a receipt of it. And we have broadcast a cryptographic receipt to the entire network. That way you don't even need to have a physical receipt, because the entire network has a receipt. So you, me, and everybody, we all have proof that the transaction occurred. And triple entry accounting is like really what blockchain is. And so that is the true breakthrough. And using it was what we came to find out was crucial to unlocking and solving the Byzantine general problem, the double spending problem, the copying files problem that you mentioned, and so forth.
Okay, so there's blockchain, as eloquently and concise as we can make it. Now let's talk about how Bitcoin is scarce. And Zach, how is Bitcoin scarce?
So Bitcoin is scarce because of the halvings and the supply cap. So two factors really are at work at the same time. The first is that every 4 years, the amount of Bitcoin that are created every year gets cut in half, or really more specifically, every block, the Bitcoin are cut in half every 4 years. Like each block, the reward is cut in half. So when Bitcoin first came out, every 10 minutes, which is the average block time, and we can talk about the difficulty adjustment and how it hits 10 minutes, but it's supposed to be roughly every 10 minutes. And so let's just use 10 minutes for simplicity's sake. Every 10 minutes, 50 Bitcoin were created. And then 4 years later, once a certain number of blocks hit, 210,000 to be specific, then 25 Bitcoin were created. Then at 210,000 blocks, 12 and a half are created. And then 210,000 blocks, 6.25 are created. And that's where we're at today, 6.25. In 2024, it'll be 3.125. 1 point, and it goes and forth until eventually it hits zero. But it gets close to zero pretty quick.
Yep.
And by 2032, that number will be less than 1 Bitcoin per 10 minutes. And right now we're at 6, so you should probably get some.
Yeah, now's the time. Bitcoin just sold off about 10%, so great time to buy. This is not financial advice. We are not your fiduciaries, and do your own research. But
Yep.
thanks for listening, Nafal and everyone else.
and compliance. Yeah.
Yeah,
It's not
yeah.
financial advice, but like it's good advice. It's not financial advice though.
So Bitcoin halves, but basically what Zach is saying is that there is a certain supply of Bitcoin that exists today that you can go out and
Right.
purchase.
Right.
There's
And so
also Bitcoin that doesn't yet exist, and Bitcoin inflates like other currencies, but it's the way that it inflates. So like over the next 100 years, hardly not many new Bitcoin are created.
Right.
We've already created a lot of Bitcoin. So the Bitcoin that's the terminal value or the terminal supply of Bitcoin is not that far off, and Bitcoin will continue to inflate slowly and slower and slower and slower until it's not inflating anymore, and every Bitcoin that will ever be created
Right.
will be created.
And
So
I think, Bo, that's a good point. This halving was particularly timely because a few sort of
May 2020 for those.
Yeah. So what happened last halving was the Federal Reserve started printing a ton of money, just creating a situational need for a currency that isn't getting printed to oblivion. But on top of that, I think it was just the timing of the halving too, because in the last halving, I think we talked about the CPI in the last episode. We talked, the CPI is like the average, the thrown around inflation measure, or PCE. Either way, they're both like 1 or 2%. And the last halving, it brought Bitcoin's inflation rate down from 3.5 to roughly 1.7. So you could say that previously Bitcoin was inflating its supply faster than the US dollar and other fiat currencies up until the most recent halving. Now, that is absolutely the opposite case. And any point forward from here, Bitcoin will have far less inflation until it eventually gets to zero. But even relatively speaking to fiat currencies, a couple of years ago, fiat currencies were increasing at 5% a year, but Bitcoin was increasing at 10% a year in inflation rate. So the every 4-year halving combined with the supply cap of 21 million. And so what happens is eventually, like that 21 million, many people think that that's like a chosen number. That was not a chosen number. 21 million is not like a number that Satoshi picked out of their butt. Like 21 million is all of the halving rewards, all like average, like added up. It's actually not 21 million. It's 20,999,000.997 or something like that. Like,
is it one of those numbers that you get when you multiply 1 by 2 and then 2 by 2 and then 4 by 2 and then 8 by 2?
So it's what you get when you cut the halving every 210,000 blocks. If you do a block every 10 minutes, then the first, 50 Bitcoin times 10 minutes times 7 days a week plus 25 Bitcoin times 10 minutes plus 6.25 and 12 and like you add them all up and it comes out to 20 million. Like, but at the end of time, it hits that. It's actually so the way that the Bitcoin supply chart works is it's like this.
Yeah.
And that like flattening of the curve, the real flattening of the curve. Sorry, Fauci. The real flattening of the curve is at 21 million Bitcoin. And so but that's not like a chosen number that was derived upon.
Thank you. Okay. Next thing we'll talk about with Bitcoin. It's decentralized and borderless. What does that mean?
So it's decentralized in that a miner cannot overtake the network.
What is a miner?
Yeah. So someone that spends electricity to process Bitcoin transactions and guarantee their authenticity by solving a puzzle.
Thank you.
So these puzzles get increasingly harder and harder to solve the more people that mine. And so miners are crucial because they're a checks and balances system to the nodes. The nodes are the non-mining nodes. Really, they're all nodes, because if you're a miner, you're a node too, but in more generally colloquialisms, it's just referred to as miners and nodes. So the miners verify, they expend all the electricity, and they get the block reward when Bitcoin are created. In exchange for the reward, they process everybody's Bitcoin transactions, and they also collect transaction fees when you send your Bitcoin, because eventually there'll be no more Bitcoin block subsidy. You won't get any more Bitcoin when they're created. When all 21 million are created, the only way to earn Bitcoin will be through working for it, or as a miner, in the miner's case at least, processing the blocks with transaction fees. And so there's a long debate on, like, will transaction fees be enough to cover block subsidies in the future? And the answer is yes, duh. But we'll get to that in another episode. So the miners cannot manipulate the blockchain unless they have 51% of the mining hash power. And the hash power is just like the computing power. So the harder Bitcoin gets to mine, the less likely it is that one institution or even a group of coercive institutions have enough hash power to do so. And so it's very important that we continue to advocate for Bitcoin mining in America and remove that centralization out of China and out of just countries that don't want Americans to have Bitcoin because they want them.
Don't be like Turkey.
Yeah, or India, who's banning Bitcoin. Like, it's crazy. So, but anyway, like, so the miners have like a checks and balance system, and the nodes are the other side that has a checks and balance. So nodes are the users who don't mine, but who verify the miner's transactions. So if you're a miner and you expend all of this electricity to mine Bitcoin, and it's a bullshit transaction, you try to give yourself more Bitcoin than you actually have, then the nodes are going to reject it, and then your block gets rejected, and all the electricity that you just spent and all the machinery and all that stuff, it's all wasted. You get nothing. So it's kind of like this beautiful checks and balances system that works on itself without requiring any central coordination. And I tear up just talking about it because it's such a genius invention. Like, so the nodes are the way that the miners can't cheat, and the nodes are the way to get representation as a Bitcoin user. So, the only way to really truly verify that your Bitcoin are your Bitcoin and not trust anyone is to run your own node and verify that all the transactions are according to your rules. So Bitcoin's upgraded many times throughout the years, and the upgrades are contentious because not all the time do all the nodes agree to the upgrades. Like, they don't always think they're the best thing. You're kind of seeing that play out with this Taproot upgrade right now. And like, I know it's like very deep and detailed, and we won't get into it, but the point is that, like, users don't have to upgrade to these upgrades, and they can choose to user activated soft fork the chain, and if they don't like it. So it truly is, like, at least to this day, the best version of a decentralized organization of people. And I don't mean organization as in like a company, because Bitcoin is not a company. Like, that's why they can't sue the CEO of Bitcoin, because there isn't one.
Yeah. So let me try to dumb that down a little bit. Bitcoin is a protocol, and developers are constantly working on increasing the protocol. Now, any changes to Bitcoin are backwards compatible, meaning
not always, but there usually are.
Okay. So basically, any changes typically have to work on anything that's occurred on the network before, but they improve something going forward. And so in that way, the government could try to lock up everyone who's a Bitcoin core developer, and everyone would just continue to run nodes, which is the
right.
Bitcoin
Now the Bitcoin ecosystem may be hampered in its development if that were to occur, because ultimately, look, like, I'm not a programmer, right? Like, I'm trusting that these people who are doing whatever they're doing in Taproot and changing the Schnorr signature, changing to a Schnorr signature from an elliptical curve dot signature. Like, I don't know the mathematical soundness of one or the other. I'm just like, yeah, you guys are probably right. Because if you weren't, you're probably way more deeply invested in Bitcoin than me. And I imagine that you would have an incentive to not screw yourself. And that's kind of the attraction of Bitcoin, is because everybody's got an incentive not to cheat, and everybody's got an incentive to work together. Because if we work together and don't cheat, we all benefit, because we all benefit when Bitcoin's prominence increases. So
Exactly. Warren Buffett says, don't underestimate the power of incentives. And I think Bitcoin is so well designed in that way that it is just a series of incentives that causes me to think it's going to live forever, a lot longer than other currencies we
or
currently
us.
meddling.
So
Yeah. Yeah.
you know what's I can't remember who said this, but I read this in a book, and I think it might have been Saif Dean, the guy who wrote the Bitcoin Standard, but I don't think it was, because I don't want to put words in his mouth, especially after what I'm about to say. But he would probably agree with me anyway, though. I read somewhere that the reason that stealing and cheating is so prevalent in our society is because it's incentivized. And that sounds really counterintuitive, because you're like, what do you mean it's incentivized? Like, you go to jail if you get caught. Right. But if you don't get caught, you get the stuff. So unlike Bitcoin.
I'm going to shoot 67 today. Just letting everyone know.
Oh, but, is that good?
Yeah, 67's below par, but I'll probably win some money. But I guess the point I'm trying to make is I'm going to cheat and I'm not going to get caught.
Oh, okay. I got it. So if you were Tiger Woods, you wouldn't need to, but because you aren't, there's an incentive to cheat, and there's a penalty that came about correspondingly because there's an incentive to cheat. If there was no benefit to cheating, people wouldn't cheat. And that's Bitcoin. You can try to cheat. It's not that you're going to get caught. It's because if you were going to get caught, there would be an incentive to cheat and get away with it. But you cannot cheat. I guess if you could manipulate 51% of the hash power, but then if you do that, you're going to break Bitcoin's credibility, and congratulations, you stole all the Bitcoin and they're freaking worthless. So that's like, there's just like, it's a circle. Yeah. You cannot cheat, you cannot steal, reliably speaking, and Lightning Network's built on this. I mean, like, it's the first truly self-incentivizing, what do they call it? Like a flywheel, or like it keeps itself going, and it rewards you for being honest, because it adds value to the ecosystem. That's not like our normal society.
No, Bitcoin is decentralized. It's in virtually there's nodes in every country.
I imagine so. Yeah.
There's miners in probably close to every country.
Now that I probably would disagree with. Yeah. Just because a node costs a couple $100 one time, if that. If you have an old laptop, you can run a node with a terabyte of memory.
Let's say miners are in 75% of countries, or
I bet you they're in every continent.
In 60, every continent, right? And it also works well where it's cold, because it's a lot of energy.
It's not a lot of heat, right?
Creates heat. And so, but I guess I'm trying to wrap this part up, and so what I'm saying is that Bitcoin is all over the world, and the incentive is for everyone to work together on it. Right. And there's miner and nodes virtually everywhere. So no single government can turn off the Bitcoin network. They can only turn themselves off from the Bitcoin network.
Right, which is disadvantageous to them.
Very disadvantageous. Now, let's just talk about how Bitcoin is secure real quick. And then I think next week, or maybe 2 weeks from now, what we'll talk about is more the macro environment and why we think Bitcoin is the solution to a lot of what's going on. Today, we've talked a lot about what the Bitcoin network is, but why don't you talk about how it's secure?
So part of that security model is that checks and balances system that I was just mentioning. So the nodes make sure that the miners are being honest, and the miners make sure that the nodes can send transactions, because the nodes don't have the electricity expenditure invested to verify everybody's transactions like the miners do. So it's that checks and balances system, very similarly to what the United States government is set up like, which is why it's so crazy that the United States doesn't embrace Bitcoin, because it's like the most American of ideas. I mean, it truly is. It's about everybody, including everyone, empowering everyone, giving something to work for, checks and balances system, not too much power in any central hand. Like that is literally like what America was founded on. But
Yep.
we have lost our way as a country. But
Liberty and
yeah,
the pursuit of happiness.
and freedom of speech and freedom and censorship resistance. I mean, that's part of what protects Bitcoin too. Is like you can't. No one can tell you what to do with your Bitcoin. Now incentives can steer you. And I think that's where people maybe get confused. It's like incentives can steer you very powerfully, but no one's forcing you to do anything. You can send your Bitcoin all to the burn address if you want to. It'll help everybody because that'll decrease the supply forever. So, I mean, like, there's no one makes you use Bitcoin. No one makes you not use it. It's simply a thing that you do because you trust and have more faith in it than the current currency that you're using to account for your value that you trade your time for. So, I mean, really, like money is just a placeholder for a time that we spent in the past, and the time that we spent in the past is sunk cost. So all we can do at this point is like decide where do we want our money to, where is our money going to, where do I have faith that my money's going to hold its value best? And I think it's Bitcoin because of the characteristics of its properties that we're talking about.
Yeah.
So that security and an inability for a middleman to come and manipulate the supply, manipulate your ability to send and receive, manipulate who you can send it to, like all those things give me confidence that those qualities are going to be valuable to other people because they're valuable to me, and then therefore the currency itself will have more value.
Right. I love the argument that it's for the black market and it's for drug kingpins and all that, because it is literally the blockchain is the most transparent thing in the world. I mean, it's a matter of figuring out who was doing what, sure. But with the US dollar, we don't get a US dollar and printed on it was every person that's ever transacted in it, what they bought, or and so this is what's possible with Bitcoin and the blockchain. It's going to be far more transparent, far more secure than any currency we've ever used before.
Yeah, and like all things, it's trade-offs, right? So that transparency is great. The transparency is also really bad because it gives people who maybe don't have good intentions an ability to track data that they don't, maybe that you don't want them to have. And that's not to say that you're doing anything bad. Maybe they're the bad guys, right? What is good and bad anyway? As I get older, I'm starting to wonder, like, I think more things are gray. I don't know that the government is good or bad. I think everyone is trying, we're all trying to get through life the best we can based on the values that we feel are important to us. And I'm not in any position to tell anyone what values are important to them. I just know it's ones that are important to me and can make an educated guess on the commonality ones that we have and that we'll have similar ones in the future based on, how events unfold. But yeah, I mean, like the network's it's gonna go through ebb and flows, and like the privacy is gonna increase, and Taproot, which I mentioned just briefly, is gonna have a trade-off too. Like maybe the way Taproot's going to work is that it's going to put everybody's public keys like right there. So it's going to make the Bitcoin blockchain more quantum susceptible. So in that regard, Taproot's a terrible upgrade. Also, it's going to make transaction fees much lower. Well, not much lower, but it's going to make transaction fees lower, particularly for multi-signature types of wallets. And it's also going to make all transactions look the same. So helps with privacy. So it's like, like you create like 4 problems fixing one, and that's just life, you know. Like we figured out electricity, and now we have CO2 emissions to deal with as a result. But I wouldn't necessarily say that electricity is a bad thing, right? And so I think the lack of privacy is a bad thing, but it's also a good thing, right? So there'll be developments through Lightning Network, through side chains, through other protocol upgrades that increase the privacy without sacrificing the other qualities, which we very much so desire.
Cool. So that was the 301 course. We started with the 101 course, but now Zach's on to something else. So Zach, why don't next week we talk about what can stop Bitcoin? So we'll talk about the risks, and then we'll talk about where. No. I gotta go. So we'll talk about what can stop Bitcoin, and we'll talk about why we're so excited about it from an economic standpoint, a macroeconomic standpoint, which to me, that's the most exciting part. The technology and how it works. I'm really happy we talked about this, and I think a lot of people had questions, and if we didn't explain everything, but this will at least lead people to start doing the research on their own. So I'm going to go cheat myself to a course record. And Zach, any final thoughts for today?
Yep. 3 thoughts.
Okay.
Bitcoin dropped by $10,000 per Bitcoin in the last 24 hours. If you didn't like it at 65 and you still don't like it at 55, maybe this isn't for you. Second point, no one can shut it down. So that's a precluding teaser for the next episode. Nothing can shut it down. Anyone who tries will fail. And the third is if you guys are still watching our podcast after the second one, we would love to subscribe, leave a comment if we did miss some things that are like, because I tend to ramble when I talk about Bitcoin, and I'm, trying to keep me focused is Bo's goal with this podcast. So if you have some questions, you can reach out to either one of us on Twitter or leave a comment in the YouTube. But yeah, we're all figuring this out together. And so depending on when you're listening to, like maybe in a couple of years, this stuff isn't even, hopefully it's close to relevant still, but yeah. So thank you guys for watching. Bo, you want to sign us off?
Yeah, I'll sign us off. Quickly, Zach, what kind of product have you used in your hair today?
I did use L'Oreal shampoo. I like the smelly stuff. I shouldn't have said that on live TV, but I like that. You like it?
I like it. I have some Kevin Morby Easy Rider in my hair, and then I put on a ski helmet. So that's my look today. Last week was hats, so we talked about the hats we were wearing. So today's our hair products.
Hair product.
Yeah, we got to keep.
Next week, I plan. My hair's getting so long that I might wear a ponytail pretty soon. So
cool. Mine's a do-rag next week. So. All right, everyone. Thanks for listening to Value Stack, where we talk all things stacking sats and value investing. We're Bo and Zach, Shaper Funds and BTC BEP, and have a wonderful week.